Вітання усім, 141.
Hello everyone, we're on day 141 of Ukraine's heroic resistance to Russia's full-scale invasion. My name is Oleg Panyuta, this is Media Center Ukraine, and we have the opportunity to put a few questions to the deputy head of the All-Ukrainian Agrarian Council, or the All-Ukrainian Farmers Council, Denis Marchuk. We are talking, of course, among other things, about the event that drew everyone's attention yesterday, the four-part meeting in Turkey between Ukraine, Turkey, Russia, under the aegis of the UN, on the possibility of the unblocking of trade routes and extracting Ukrainian grain in order to solve the crisis. How would you, what is your assessment of the results of the discussion yesterday? Well, yes, the information is out there, but there's not enough information to create a roadmap of how it will all happen, because all the four parties to the discussion, to the negotiation, have been extremely cautious in their words, because really they've set forth the lines, so to speak, but there haven't been any agreements signed. Probably the process will be formalized next week. But as for today, we can say that the coordination headquarters will be working as part of this agreement. It will be working on a roadmap on deblocking Ukrainian ports. More specifically, there is some hope that after 5 months of war and blockade, possibly the Ukrainian export through the Black Sea will finally work, because it's one of the main highways, main traffic routes, export routes for our grain, and so it's not just Ukraine that has an interest in this, but also the world, because food prices are growing. Countries that are dependent on other countries for food, including Ukraine, are also awaiting this. There's the possibility of social and political perturbations and protests, particularly in North Africa and in the Middle East. This may bring forth some more large-scale conflicts. What do we have today? We have a sense that perhaps it's the Ukrainian side that will be conveying the vessels to the neutral waters. Um, they will be inspected by the UN and the Turkish side, which is also reasonably good news for us. We support this. Finally, everything will depend on how the unblocking will begin, because in the question of unblocking is security guarantees is perhaps the most important thing, and we're providing this security to ourselves with the help of the Ukrainian forces and the mine pollution of the Black Sea. And one of the key aspects is how will demining occur. So next week we should probably expect more information, but I wanted to stress that probably we will also get more information after the meeting of President Erdogan, the Turkish President Erdogan, with a representative of Russia, Putin. You know that they're planning this meeting on the 15th, I think, on July the 15th, where arguments will continue about unblocking of Ukrainian ports. Because if I were or asked my opinion, I think Russia has no interest in this unblocking taking place. They're taking a lot. They're putting a lot of attacks on the territory of Ukraine. They have not given up on attacking the south. So I'm sure we'll hear more about this. We all look with hope and expectations on this reserve path through the mouth of the Danube. To what extent might it be a solution for us? How quickly? Well, the operation on the liberation of Snake Islands, Miyane Island, really does give us an extra path for boats that might go northwest through the Black Sea to the Danube. But unfortunately, these aren't the same sort of levels that levels of export that we had. Of course, it will add to the overall export numbers, and we've already seen information where vessels are coming in to convey grain, and I imagine that it should add a few 100,000 additional tons of export. But the problem is that truly large cargo ships and vessels cannot get in there. Sea vessels. These are more river port boats. So there has to be. We still have to put our priorities on unblocking Odessa, Chornomorsk, and Pivdennny, the ports. As far as the extent is concerned, what what sort of capacity might we expect by the end of summer through this river path? The river ports of the Danube are being used quite well. Ismail, Reni, um, we have about 1 million tons moving in that direction. So if we can attract, if with the help of our Western partners, perhaps Romania, we can um, uh, we can build a more effective model of hosting ships, um, a more effective traffic of ships, then perhaps we could expand this to maybe 1.5 million per month, precisely by using these river ports. But this, of course, will not save us if we do not have the Black Sea as the main path. Definitely. What other opportunities do we have? What are the farmers working on? Well, today there's also another priority, another key moment is railway traffic, and again, where we stand on, we see that our partners unfortunately cannot handle the capacity that is coming from the territory of Ukraine. So, of course, in these conditions, there's a lot of attention given to the negotiations with Poland to increase the number of train cars that might take Ukrainian produce. We are still holding out hope for trucks, for large trucks, because there are more and more checkpoints on the border that could help us in this direction. We're also talking about opening, not only with the Polish side, but also with Slovakia, and of opening more capacity, more tons for general export. We know that the aggressor are deliberately destroying agrarian infrastructure, farming infrastructure. Can we assess the amounts that we are unable to preserve today in terms of elevators? The statistics seem to say that, considering the leftovers from last season and the preliminary figures of this season, we're looking at 10 to 15%, 10 to 15 million tons of grain that need alternative storage options, because a large number of storage systems have either been destroyed in areas where they were in combat areas, or they're in temporarily occupied territories in Kherson and Zaporizhia regions. But in this context, we're working on alternative mechanisms of keeping grain, including technology like polymerase sleeves, and we're trying to bring these additional tools into Ukraine to provide alternatives to the usual huge storage containers. So if this works, we might resolve the problem of storage. Yes, I think so, because today we have support from our partners, from Europe, from the United States, that today are even sending some humanitarian aid. Additionally, the business is not waiting; they're looking through companies that distribute this technology. So, God willing, we'll have harvest, and hopefully we'll be able to preserve it. With regard to this, we know that the aggressor has been deliberately burning fields with grain and wheat. What are the losses today? What has been destroyed of harvest already? Quite difficult to calculate, because essentially incendiary missiles are being thrown at Ukraine in these border areas or in temporary occupied territories. We can only say that this is thousands of hectares of land that have taken this kinds of damage. I think that in the process of the reaping campaign, the farmers and the authorities will be looking at the assessment of the losses, because this has to be another claim from Ukraine with regard to compensation for those who have been harmed by the actions of the aggressor. The stolen grain moving from the western regions, southern regions, the destroyed farming companies. I think this will be another point, another case, another basis for another suit against Russia and their actions in the territory of Ukraine. We've seen that the aggressor is now using on the one hand using our situation, but on the other hand screaming about an extremely successful harvest this year, from 100 to 150 million surplus mm, of the grain that Russia is planning to harvest. Are you looking at the market of the neighboring country? Might this really affect the global market of grain in the world? Um, Look, Russia likes making big pronouncements. Um, we'll see how it works out, but of course they're announcing this record because of due to occupied territories of Ukraine, like Zaporizhia, Kherson, Luhansk, Mykolaiv regions, Kharkiv, where there is still some presence of the aggressors' armies. We expect perhaps up to 4 million for Ukraine. Russia is announcing these numbers, letting the world understand that look, there's an alternative. If the question is hunger and starvation, then you can talk to us. But if you want to talk to us, then of course let's talk in both terms. And probably in this sense, this extortion, this terrorism will lead to the weakening of economic and political sanctions, or will be used to try and achieve the weakening of sanctions. And in this sense, the world must stand firm in supporting Ukraine in her fight against the aggressor, again, strengthen the sanctions, support Ukraine financially, support Ukraine with heavy weaponry, including including in our sea fleet. So in this context, again, we must not we must not uh, we must not buy into Russia's narratives. However, we know that the prices for grain is growing. Prices for food prices are growing in the world because of the Russian product prices. And on the other hand, Ukraine has a surplus of grain produce. Do you think Ukrainian prices will change? Apart from apart from combat and war, there are other factors that affect the economy, and they're often brought about by war. We're talking about inflation that is happening in Ukraine, over 20%. That already sets the mood for for setting prices. We're also looking at logistical expenses, the fuel prices. Okay, they have stabilized a little bit, even gone down slightly, but these aren't the pre-war numbers that we had prior to February 24th. This will of course set the mood for and set the final price for the producers who will be than supplying to the market for Ukrainian families. I predict that in this period of time, we will see about 20% growth in prices and the number of products that are dependent on these factors, such as logistics and inflation. Uh, and another question, of course, the farmers are always looking to the future because they have to see the future harvest and what to do with it. Are the farmers seeing what the grain market would the changes in the grain market be like after the war? We're starting to plan and try and be more productive. Try in creating produce with this added value added. We must not be dependent on exporting only raw materials. If we have added value, it's easier to export these goods through the railway and get much more funds. So I'm sure that for all the difficulties and all the hardships of wartime, we will see programs, we will see producers creating other processed products as well. And in this sense, it's very important for us to work with the state authorities and the specialized ministries, because what we want is one thing, but we need funds, and it's very difficult to invest into a country where there's a war, which is why we need important inner resources and state guarantees to support the sector in this difficult time. Thank you very much. With us was Denis Marchuk, Deputy Head of the All Ukrainian Council of Farmers. I wish that the tank that that we see on your T-shirt quickly turns into a sewing machine or agrarian machine. Thank you very much, and we will continue our cooperation. See you in our next